Driver, you better take this man home. He's off the tight.
Where to?
Where do you live, sir? You.
All right, then. Come on up again. That's the way. You've had a few, have you? Yeah. All right, in you get. Come on. There. If you purge yourself in my cab, you pay for the stuff.
Yeah, you purge myself. You purge yourself in my cab. You're up for it. You're in trouble. Well, he's not in trouble for purging himself, that poor old chap. He's going to end up dead. That's from the beginning of the 2012 ABC TV version of The Mystery of a Hansom Cab. And it was spine-tingling stuff. Well, the book, The Mystery of a Hansom Cab, was published in Melbourne in 1886. It's by Fergus Hume, and, well, it was a sensation when it came out. It was a bestseller. It was a bestseller. And it spawned plays and songs. There was even a spoof called The Mystery of a Wheelbarrow. And you might remember, actually, that we talked about The Mystery of a Hansom Cab in our book club back in 2012, which was the same year that ABC version, the TV version, was screened. Well, Dr. Lucy Sussex is an expert on 19th century fiction in all of its glorious variety, and she's written a very, very, very classy book about this novel and about its author, in fact, about the whole crime fiction scene in Victorian times. And I read it during my holiday, and I loved it. It's called Blockbuster. Welcome to Books and Arts.
Thank you for having me.
Although you didn't know it, you were spending a week with me on the beach at Port Douglas. You
oh,
and
really?
I? Yes, you were there in my hot little hand. I've had a lovely week enjoying sunshine and the darkness of Victorian Melbourne. So let's set the scene. What's the premise of The Mystery of a Hansom Cab?
Well, it's a cold July night and outside Scott's Church, and there's a couple of drunks staggering along, and one of them hails a hansom cab, and so begins a trip down to St Kilda, in which one of the people in the cab is murdered and the other one gets out at Melbourne Grammar.
Which is halfway to St Kilda, well, even one-third of the way to St Kilda.
Yep.
And he runs away into the night.
Yes, and so the cabman continues on and at St Kilda Junction asks for directions and discovers his passenger is dead.
Bum, 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 bum.
Yep. So begins a mystery about who the dead man is and who murdered him, which goes from the high society of Melbourne to its seamy depths, the slums of Little Lon and the opium dens and brothels.
So Little Lon, or Little Lonsdale Street, was well known as a sort of place of brothels and opium dens and so on. So you've got the boulevards of light where the people in their finery promenade in marvellous Melbourne, this great gold-rich city of the late 19th century, and down the side alleys are poverty and despair and criminality.
Seamy depths. So this book covers all the. It's a real snapshot of Melbourne at the time. Marvellous Melbourne, one of the richest cities in the world, and vibrant with gold money, but due for a crash, which happened in the next decade.
Now, Lucy, you and I are both enthusiasts for 19th century Australian fiction. When we talk about this book, we're not beating it up. We're not pretending that there is some kind of, not very good book that we're making a big deal about because it's Aussie. It was a huge success.
It's probably sold about 25,000 copies locally, that is in the Austral colonies, and when it went to England, it sold about between 300,000 copies up to about 500,000, which makes it certainly the biggest selling and certainly fastest selling detective novel of the 1800s.
But if you sold 500,000 copies of a book now, you'd still be elated.
You'd still be doing very well.
I mean, your publisher is sitting outside the studio. I'm looking at her face there. She would be grinning from ear to ear if we could sell a book for 500,000 copies.
Oh, this is Stieg Larsson territory.
Yeah. We're right out on the edge. So it's big, and there is this tragic story that Hume himself sold the copyright. Is this right, for £50 before it went off to London?
£50 wasn't such a bad amount of money.
Well, I mean, come on, he sold 50,000. What did you say? I mean, thousands and thousands of copies. I mean, he got ripped off, surely.
He did get ripped off. He actually believed that a book with a colonial setting couldn't succeed in England, and he'd really absorbed the cultural cringe. And then it was one of the worst business decisions in 19th century literature, really, because it went on to sell. He could have got £10,000.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, easy.
And there are all these spin-offs from it. Tell us about them. I mean, I love this, The Mystery of a Wheelbarrow. What was that?
That was a parody, which actually had which was sort of full of terrible jokes. And that was published in England and Australia. There was play versions. There was even some really seamy versions. There were people impersonating Hume in England. There was an alleged copycat murder. So it had ramifications all over the place. There were 3 silent films.
And there was a song, I believe.
Yes.
We've got a little bit of the song here. Perhaps we'll listen to the song and you can tell us what it is.
One night 'twas in a thoroughfare well known in London town, a hansom cab came driving by which had the windows down. It seemed to be a mystery and went at such a pace that people stopped and looked a while, then shouting out gave chase. Stop the cab, whoa, whoa, whoa. Somebody hold the horse's head and don't leave go.
Discover the mystery of the I'd love to be in musical theatre. A hansom cab. Where did that come from?
That was London. That was by Frederick Durand-Doe, and it was a musical song. Extremely catchy. It must have done quite well.
I think I'll be humming it all day long. Australia will be singing The Mystery of the Hansom Cab all day. And what's this about an orangutan? Why is there a monkey in the song?
In the third verse, The Mystery of the Hansom Cab, it turns out there's an orangutan inside. But this is actually a very clever allusion to Edgar Allan Poe, the murder in the Rue Morgue, which was one of the very famous early texts in crime fiction, because the orangutan did it.
Oh, really monkey business.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. So this is not the first crime fiction novel. Let's talk about its place in the genre. As you say, The Mystery of the Rue Morgue, which was published in 1841, featured a detective. So it's a crime fiction story, is it?
It's a short crime fiction story. There was a lot of crime fiction actually borrows as a meeting of various genres, from the gothic to melodrama to true crime, and they all start to come together in mid-century. People might remember the Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White, which is a very famous mystery narrative, although they called it in those days sensation fiction, which was the original label.
So what I hadn't come across that term before. So sensation fiction meant what? It
was basically fiction that was full of seamy stuff and a lot of bigamy, as features in The Hansom Cab, and murder and blood. But sometimes it had the mystery structure and sometimes it didn't. So the genre was getting refined towards the end of the 19th century, and round about the 1880s, they finally get a label for it, which is detective fiction.
Now, what about Emile Gaboriau?
Yes, he was a French writer of the 1860s who invented the police procedural novels, and he had police as central to his novel with it. And Monsieur Lecoq was his detective. Gaboriau took some time to be translated, but when he was translated into English in the 1880s, it got huge sales.
Oh, right.
And this is what Fergus Hume read in England and resolved that he was going to have a go at.
Now, Lucy, the curious thing about The Mystery of a Hansom Cab is that it doesn't have one detective. I mean, I can remember when I first read it, being a bit, it was a stumbling block for me because I couldn't quite work out how I was supposed to read the novel, because you meet a detective. Is it Detective Gorby we meet first, yep. I think. And then there's another detective comes into the case, and yep. Then you've got a solicitor or a barrister who starts investigating the case as well. And it takes you a while to understand that that no one of these three men is your hero, that it's the mystery itself that you've got to focus on as each of these three men carries out their investigation with a bit of tension between them to add some, some emotional power to the story.
It was a very typical model in sensation fiction. You can see it in Wilkie Collins' previous novel, The Woman in White, and previous to his Moonstone, which did have a police detective. But part of the trouble was that fiction at the time, there was a lot of anxiety about the police as being sort of lower class, and who are these lower class people having such power? Which you could,
Oh, you mean your readers wouldn't like a mere policeman as their hero?
there were, unless, well, Conan Doyle gets around this by having Sherlock Holmes, who's this gifted amateur. But
Well, he's very clearly not police, though.
no, but he's a gifted amateur.
Yeah.
He's a bit like Miss Marple, but there was real anxiety about privileging the detective, the police detective, an ordinary person, as opposed to the middle-class hero of most novels.
In fact, if you think about those 19th century detectives, they often put the police down, don't they? The police are often depicted as Mr. Plod, who's too thick and sort of mechanical in his way of thinking to solve a clever crime.
Yeah, even Dickens has Inspector Bucket, which is a ridiculous name.
Poor old Inspector Bucket. Yes, you can't get anything right if you're Inspector Bucket. Well, I wondered whether, as I was reading your book over the weekend or over the past week, whether The Handsome Cab was a sort of dead end in the genre, precisely because he doesn't have a hero detective. Whereas, as you point out in the book, the exact contemporary of Fergus Hume is Conan Doyle, who's born in the same year, and he created Sherlock Holmes. So he comes up with the aspect of the genre that will end up being the form that most people will follow.
I don't think you can call it a dead end, because in fact it actually helps create the publishing genre. It's maybe not its form, but its success means that publishers say, hold on, we ought to be publishing more of this detective fiction. And what about that young man, Doyle, who had this Detective Holmes in Beeton's Christmas Annual? Maybe we should persuade him to write a few more of those, because Doyle actually thought his first Holmes story was only going to be a one-off, and then suddenly, people were saying, "Come on, write some more of these," and went on and on and on. And actually, Hume went on to publish 140 detective novels afterwards, so it wasn't a dead end for him either. But certainly, that model of the diffuse detective was by the wayside.
Lucy Sussex is my guest here this morning on Books and Arts, and we're talking about her book about the mystery of the Handsome Cab. She's written a history, well, a kind of biography, really, of the book. So briefly, as we wind up, Fergus Hume is quite a character himself, and you found out more about him than I thought we could possibly know. He had an incredible childhood.
Yes, his father ran the lunatic asylum in Dunedin, New Zealand, and so he literally grew up surrounded by mad people, but what a wonderful means of getting to know about abnormal psychology.
Yeah.
And
you're using the language of the 19th century here, mad people and lunatic asylum. But you say that he develops a kind of empathy for the outsider because of this childhood, with a father who was very progressive, it needs to be said.
It's certainly true that the asylum in Dunedin was very progressive. They had occupational therapy, they had theatre, which meant that Fergus wanted to become a playwright. They had black and white minstrels visiting. It was a very progressive environment, and Hume goes on from that to have a lot of sympathy for fallen women, prostitutes. He even has a gypsy detective later on, Hagar of the pawn shop. So he became very interested in the outsiders from that experience.
But he leaves that world that he grows up in Dunedin, which, as you say, is dominated by Presbyterians. So there's a very worthy, sober kind of tone to his childhood, and comes to Melbourne, where this whole bohemian scene is just starting up. Just paint us a picture of that world, because he's such an enthusiastic participator in the bohemian life of Victorian Melbourne.
Oh yeah, he has a lot of fun. He's a day job as a law clerk, and he's writing, but he's going out to the theatre. He's meeting all these interesting people. He's writing opera with Alfred Plumpton, who was Madame Brussels' boyfriend.
She was a well-known brothel keeper.
Yes. So he's fully participating in bohemian Melbourne, and he's having the time of his life.
Actually, bohemian Melbourne of the 80s is a bit like, well, it's a bit like the 1960s in the sense that there's a kind of youth culture that's a bit rebellious, it's a bit arty, it's into alcohol. They're having the ideologies are different, but there is a sort of rebellious, creative energy and optimism about the time.
And Hume was quite rebellious, fancy putting drunks in the vicinity of Scott's church, which was a Presbyterian church. I mean, that's a bit naughty.
Oh, yes. So that opening scene that we heard, that we started our conversation with, actually occurs within Cooey. I mean, out the front of Scott's church, this great monument, built ironically by Nellie Melba's dad.
Yes, and he probably encountered Nellie Melba. Certainly his sister Mary did, because they were competing as opera singers on the stage.
Lucy Sussex, it's been a joy to spend the past week with you on the beach at Port Douglas, and it's been lovely to have you here in the studio. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Literary historian Dr. Lucy Sussex, and her book is called Blockbuster! And it's published by Text Publishing, who've also reprinted the novel. So you could do worse than reread the book or read it for the first time and then read Lucy's terrific account of it, how it came to be. And I'd love to know what your favourite type of crime fiction is, especially from the olden days. Are you a Sherlock Holmes type, or are there other 1930s novels or earlier 1890s novels with aristocratic detectives, country house weekends, that sort of thing? I'd love to know what you're into. Across Australia, this is RN. You're listening to Books and Arts.